Thank you very much, Norberto. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with so many good colleagues from academia, statesmen, policymakers, and I would like to thank the organizers, the International Institute for Democracy, Florida International University, Universidad Austral, and Infobae for inviting me. I would like to provide some political context to the presentation that Doug just did. I specialize in provincial politics in Argentina, and I want to say, many of you may be familiar with Argentina, some of you may not, that Argentina is a federal democracy like the United States with very strong and autonomous provinces. They are very powerful. As Doug was hinting, these governors can do a lot of things without national approval. Even though they are very similar institutionally, when you see politics, in fact, in each province, they vary a lot, especially in terms of democracy and authoritarianism. Several Argentine provinces, maybe the ones you may be more familiar with, like Córdoba, Santa Fe, the province of Buenos Aires, Mendoza, are quite democratic. They are well-functioning democracies, while some other provinces have very clear authoritarian features. They are institutionally democratic. They have elections. They have opposition parties. But when you see politics on the ground, practices are quite authoritarian. In democratic provinces such as the ones I mentioned, there are elections. Parties lose and win elections. Nobody has large majorities in the legislature. People feel free to express their opinions. There is a free press and a quite pluralistic press. While at the other end of the spectrum, you have provinces that different scholars call hegemonic and democratic, or hybrid. You heard the title of my book, hybrid regimes, in the sense that they have some democratic features, but they are mostly authoritarian. And the typical feature of these provinces is that governors never lose elections, ever. We have had 42 years of democracy, and that's something that doesn't happen in any real democracies around the world. Not only they never lose elections, but they win with suspicious majorities of 60, 70% in a row in some of the poorest provinces of Argentina, where you don't see policy actually working, right? So by winning large majorities and bending the rules to make those majorities turn into even larger majorities in the legislature, they end up electing their own judges, and after a few years, the political system is completely dominated by a party, typically the Peronist party, not everywhere, and sometimes even by a person or a family. The local media tends to be completely biased in favor of the incumbents, and people are, afraid of criticizing the government. There are informal ways of punishing dissidents, and there is typically there is spying on opponents, spying on journalists, on judges, on politicians in the opposition. Since Argentina democratized in 1983, the provinces that have most clearly fit this model of less democratic provinces I'm mentioning are Catamarca, Formosa, San Luis, La Rioja, Santa Cruz, which is, by the way, the home of the Kirchners, where Kirchner started his political career as governor there, and Santiago del Estero. You may be less familiar with these provinces. They tend to be smaller in population. Sometimes they're poorer, not always. They are heavily subsidized by the tax-sharing rules of Argentina's fiscal federalism. And the ones that Doug emphasized tend to be in the north of the country that has all of these other complexities related to the traffic of drugs across borders. These provinces are completely dominated by governors. The checks and balances that are formally in place are completely ineffective. Judges and the legislators rubber stamp whatever the governor wants to decide. And maybe the most iconic figure of this sort of governance in Argentina is Governor Gildo Insfrán, who has been in in this position for 30 years, getting 8 consecutive re-elections. Before that, he was 8 years vice governor. So this is a person, and you know, he will die in his position, I'm sure, and probably will leave a relative to succeed him. Gerardo Zamora of Santiago del Estero also amended the provincial constitution to allow for unlimited re-election, but the National Supreme Court, and this is very important, recently ruled against this rule, saying that it was unrepublican to have unlimited re-elections for governors. So what he did was, appointing his wife as the person to succeed him, and after one term sitting out, he came back. Doug mentioned that when they are not governors, Zamora and his wife are in the Senate. And I'm going to add something very important to this. Both of them were appointed by the Peronists, by Cristina Kirchner first, and then again by Cristina Kirchner as vice president in the last Fernandez administration, as the presidents of the Senate. And that means that they are the second people in the succession line for the president. After the president and the vice president, Gerardo Zamora and his wife were for 6 years number 3 in the presidential succession line in Argentina. I have only less than a minute, so I'm going to say something very important, is that what is behind this variance that I mentioned between Mendoza and Santiago del Estero is fiscal federalism. Doug hinted at this. We have a way of distributing money that provides a lot of money to these small, poor provinces in Argentina. Governors are very rich. They don't tax basically their population. And this is, of course, as you can imagine, a very favorable political situation. Everybody depends on the government budget in these provinces. Public employees, most people are public employees, the media, businesses in the province, NGOs, everybody depends on a government paycheck. And therefore, building an opposition is impossible. Nobody wants to be in bad terms with the provincial governor. So I'm going to close, because now I'm maybe over my time limit, to go back to the decision of the Supreme Court that I mentioned. That is, I see, if you had to think about how to solve this problem, one, of course, would be to change the legislation regarding fiscal federalism. And these rulings of the Supreme Court that have affected Formosa, Santiago del Estero, and several other provinces in Argentina, I think are a very good development, because basically it means first that we're paying attention to this issue. This issue was completely under the radar until recently. And second, that some of the most outrageous practices of these provinces are being turned down by the national government. The Supreme Court, after all, is a branch of the national government. I'm just going to say that, finishing by saying that, of course, Argentina, as Doug mentioned, has been a resilient democracy since 1983. We have had a lot of problems, but democracy has basically held up. But we still have these enclaves of very undemocratic governance in Argentina. And of course, those places are very favorable for all sorts of illegal activities, from narco traffic to corruption. And you do see, it's difficult to find out actual evidence of this, but you do see that a lot of the very corrupt practices that characterize Argentina are conducted at subnational level in provinces like this. Thank you very much.